Hello, and welcome back to my channel where I talk about pop culture and Black musical theater through the lens of Blackness. A couple of years ago, I did a really big Black musical theater series on this channel, and one of the musicals that I really focused in on was The Wiz. So when I heard that there was going to be a pre-Broadway engagement of The Wiz here in Chicago, I knew I had to see it and review it. So this video is going to be a little different. I'm not going to be necessarily analyzing things, but I am going to be talking about my time seeing the pre-Broadway engagement of The Wiz, my thoughts about it, what I liked, what I didn't like, and I've got my playbill just to prove that I did in fact see it. So let's talk about the pre-Broadway engagement of The Wiz here in Chicago. Now, The Wiz was running, I think it ended this past Sunday, which was the 9th. That was the last showing here in Chicago, but it was at the Cadillac Palace Theater. It only ran for about a week, which I found really interesting. I would have loved for it to run a little longer, because my favorite thing about when they have pre-Broadway engagements here in Chicago is you kind of get to see how the show changes, but I feel like a week is not long enough to really get proper feedback on the show and to change things. So I'm really curious to see how things are in Broadway, especially when I bring up my thoughts and what I liked and what I didn't like. I do have the actual playbill, which is nice because usually for my musical theater series, I have to go through an extensive research to find out who is part of the production. Sometimes Broadway World will have like the playbill, or even playbill.com will have the old playbills, but this time I get to actually just have it right here. The cast for this show includes Nichelle Lewis as Dorothy, we've got Alan Mingo Jr. as The Wiz, Deborah Cox as Glinda, Melody A. Bates as Auntie M and also Eveline, we've got Kyle Raymar Freeman as the Lion, we've got Philip Johnson Richardson as the Tin Man, and then Avery Wilson as the Scarecrow. I actually saw Jay Copeland as the Scarecrow instead of Avery Wilson, so just note that. Jay Copeland is the understudy for the Scarecrow, and I'm just gonna say right now, he was amazing. Jay was amazing, so props to Jay. The Wiz was directed by Shel Williams, and then it was also choreographed by Jaquel Knight. Also to note, we've got the book, which is by William F. Brown, and then additional material was also subbed in with Amber Ruffin, and then the music and the lyrics are by Charlie Smalls. We've also got scenic design by Hannah Belcher. She's really big for Black Panther. We've got the costume designer as Sharon Davis, lighting design is Ryan J. O'Gara, we've got sound design is John Weston, production design Daniel Brody, hair and wig design was Charles G. Lapointe, and makeup design was Kirk Cambridge Delpeche. We've also got the associate choreographer as Anthony Carrick Carr. Associate director was Tavinia Ribby Jefferson. Alan Renee Lewis did the vocal arrangements, and then Adam Blackstone did the dance arrangements. There's so many more people I could list. I mean, there's a whole page just for the cast and then a whole other page for the crew. So just keep that in mind. If you want to know more about the history of The Wiz and maybe its plot, I really suggest you go watch my previous video that has a whole analysis about what The Wiz is. It's much easier than me explaining that to you now, but just know that it has a really big prominence in Black culture. One thing that I will say that I was really glad to see was just that I felt like this version of The Wiz also really tried to find Black choreographers, Black designers. Like, you could tell that there was an intention to having Black people still at the head of telling this story, and I think that's really important for The Wiz. I was hoping that was the case, but that was really apparent from everything. This version of The Wiz has 2 acts just like the other one. They did add 2 new original songs to this version of The Wiz. The 2 new songs were We're Gonna Make It and Y'all Got It. Personally, I didn't feel like these 2 new songs added to the show. I felt like it kind of just made the runtime longer, so they weren't necessarily needed. They weren't really anything special to me personally, but I didn't mind them being in the show either. It just wasn't anything new or original, I thought. So now that we've gone over some technical parts of the ways, we've gone through some of the playbill, I want to talk about the things that I liked and the things that I didn't like. Overall, I really do feel like this production was semi-strong, and I really enjoyed watching it, no doubt. But there were things that I really didn't enjoy, and I will get into that. But for the most part, I really did like it. And it was really fun to just see, again, like, just there were so many black people in the audience, which I just have to stress is very rare for theater. I work in theater. I've loved theater, musical theater, for as long as I can remember, and it is very rare to have an audience that is packed with black folks. It's very hard because things are not catered to us oftentimes, and theater, quite frankly, is really accessible, or inaccessible, I should say. So I just want to stress that. I want to start off first with the things that I liked. Let's start off strong and talk about the things that I enjoyed about this version, and then we'll kind of get into some of the things I didn't really like as much and some criticisms that I have for the show. The first thing that I noticed immediately, and I did mention this person as the wig and makeup designer, the wigs looked so good. The makeup looked so good. It's rare when you see a show and you're like, man, those wigs look amazing. This show, I was blown away. Like, everybody's wig looked so good, from the ensemble members to the main cast. Like, sometimes I had to like double take to see if they even had a wig on because it just looked so good. So props to the wig designer. They held that down, and I honestly think that's brilliant because we all know in black culture, hair is a big part, right? Wigs are a big thing. You can clock when somebody's wig is a wig or when it's not good or when it's not laid, and this show did not disappoint at all. And there were also some really fun, creative wigs, especially in the Emerald City sequence and in the kind of Munchkin Land entrance as well. I mean, some of those wigs were gorgeous and beautiful. So I really have to give props to that. I loved that. And I feel like in the OG version of the Wiz, and even in the movie, I mean, the hair is like a big part of what makes the Wiz the Wiz. So I really enjoyed that. Something else that I really liked was, this is a new version, so they did try to add it and make it a little bit more modern, but the way that they made it modern didn't feel too like heavy-handed, besides one thing which I will get into later. For the most part, it felt grounded. You could tell it was still modern, but it didn't try to take away some of that nostalgic feel, and I really liked that. I appreciated it because I was a little worried they were going to make it a little corny, and I think this is something that the Wiz Live did also really great, is just kind of putting it in a modern place but not making it too modern and too out of touch so that it dates itself. I really like that. Another thing that I really liked is that everything was just so intentionally black. Like, even in the comedy, scratch that. The comedy, hilarious. I laughed. Like, every single joke that was made was funny. Everybody was laughing. People were cracking up. I don't know exactly what was ad-libbed and what's like written in the book, so I'm really interested to know about that, because it felt like some of the jokes they were saying were kind of like in the moment, which I love. I think that's so fun to kind of test out the waters and see what's funny. But man, I mean, there were just some really great jokes that like everybody got to have fun with, especially I laughed the most at like Scarecrow, at Tin Man. I was really laughing at Pearl was hilarious. Eveline was hilarious. Like, even the guards, the guards were funny. Like, I was really, really surprised at how great the humor was, and on top of that, I felt like the humor was intentionally very black. Like, the jokes that they were making were just like, you would get it maybe if you had grown up around black people, right, or you knew about black culture, but I was really pleasantly surprised at how much they really were like, you know, this is a show for black people, and like, if you want to come and enjoy the show, that's fine, you're not black, but we're gonna make the humor intentional for black folks to laugh at. And man, I mean, everybody was laughing, black or not. Like, everybody was having fun, but I was just really amazed at how much of that was black culture. They even did some playing of the dozens, which is pretty fun. If you don't know what playing of the dozens is, it's basically like back and forth banter that black people do. But they did that for, you know, a couple times in Act 2. Like, all of that I think was just really strong and really good. Another thing that I thought was really strong was the singers. Like, every single singer was incredibly strong. When it came for their time to sing, you know, a solo song, they killed it. There was not one single person who wasn't just top of the top. And I really liked how each singer made the song their own. The Wiz, it's hard, right? Like, we have cultural context for what those songs sound like, and the fact that each singer kind of got to change the song a little bit and make it their own, and it still was really strong, I think made it amazing. For instance, the feeling that we have was a little different. It was more like the one in the movie and in other versions of The Wiz that I've heard is a little more like soul jazzy, but in this version it was very much like southern gospel. And I actually noted for a lot of the songs in this version they were a little bit more gospel-y, which I didn't mind. I actually thought it was pretty fun, and I would even say I wish they'd leaned into that even more, but it was kind of remixed a little bit to be a little bit more gospel-y, so I enjoyed that, and I think that every single singer was just incredible, like, period. I really don't have, they killed it. They killed it on the music, they killed it on their acting, they killed it on just selling everything. Like, they were amazing. Another thing I really liked in this version was how they made all of the like non-human things human. So for instance, the tornado was a dancers, and the poppy flowers were actual people in poppy costumes. Like, stuff like that I really enjoyed. And I know some of that is in the OG version of The Wiz, but I just enjoyed seeing that again, and I really felt like the choreography just added to that and made it really cool and interesting. I think that's a good way when you maybe can't rely on practical effects or special effects to still bring in a really cool idea. So I love that. On top of that, because I just mentioned choreography, I have to just shout out to Jaquel Knight. The choreography, I mean, it ate. 7, 8, 9, it ate. It's rare that I go to a show. Sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, the choreography is great. But in this show, the choreography was, I would say, stellar. And it is in a large majority of The Wiz. And I was just blown away every time. And again, like, the intention to Black history, Black culture, seeing different dance moves that they did, styles, both modern and old. It was so fun and cool. And this kind of bleeds into the Emerald City sequence, which I really, really loved. Oh, it has some amazing, amazing dancing. And the audience was just like loving it and eating it up. The Emerald City sequence lasts for kind of a while. It's about 5 minutes, maybe a little longer, and the entire time was just great. Like, I wish I could be more detailed and tell you more about the choreography and more about dancing, but I can't because I don't have that kind of technical skill. But just trust me when I say, like, the dancing was incredible. The choreographer nailed it. Like, and I'm not surprised because Jaquel Knight has like such rich history with choreography and like celebrities that they've worked with, but it's different to translate that to a Broadway stage. It doesn't always translate well, but it did. It was top notch. Another thing that I really liked was there's a little like gag that they do where when the Munchkins come out to kind of sing about the fact that like Dorothy has killed one of the wicked witches, they hold up a prop shirt and it's like spray painted and it says "Rip Eveline." I loved it, and not only that, you could also buy it in the merch stand. I thought that was really, really fun. I was tempted to buy it, I really was, but I didn't. It was a little expensive, so I'd already paid a lot for the ticket, so I was like, let me not buy it, but I would really like that like little gag, and I think that's fun. There's not a lot of props in The Wiz necessarily, so when you have those little moments, that was a fun little moment that they sold. So I'm going to talk about the two things that I think were an interesting concept, but overall I hope that maybe they change it in the Broadway version a little bit, and that could really help. So I did mention that a lot of the things that were not living or not human were turned into humans. So like I said, the tornado were dancers. The poppy flowers were dancers. So the Yellow Brick Road was also turned into people. There was no actual like Yellow Brick Road in the set. It was just kind of lighting, and then what I thought was cool is they had like drumline leaders. I don't know what they're called. They had them as the Yellow Brick Road. I thought that was a really fun and cool concept, especially if like we're talking about Black culture, and I really enjoyed that. So I liked the concept of actually like these drum majors leading Dorothy and like taking her along her journey to the Emerald City. I thought that was really fun. The problem with it came that like the Yellow Brick Road shows up so much, and the drumline majors were kind of boring. They just didn't have an oomph to them. Like, the lighting was just standard yellow lighting, and then, you know, it's just 2 people, sometimes 4 people, that kind of do like kind of choreographed movements around Dorothy. But their costumes just didn't, nothing about it sparkled or shined. And because you see it like 7, 8 times, it's kind of just like, it gets old, right? I wish that there was like a little something that they added each time, or maybe their costumes were just like really gorgeous. Maybe they had like sparkle, or they were bedazzled, or something to really help sell that moment, because I really liked the idea. I just felt underwhelmed by it. And maybe there's something that lighting can do, but it just felt a little underwhelming. Great concept, but execution was meh. Kind of going into that concept with costumes, this is like no shade on the costume designer. I did feel like some of the costumes could have been a bit better. It seemed like things were half finished, and this is kind of a theme that I did feel throughout a lot of the tech elements, which is like kind of unfortunate because I like tech. I work in tech theater, and I was just surprised, but I felt very underwhelmed by a lot of the behind the scenes efforts. And not to say that like they didn't work hard. I could tell there was work put into it, but the costume specifically, and I'll get into the other stuff, felt it just lacked fun to me. The original Broadway version costumes of the Wiz are literally in the Smithsonian. That's how big of a deal they are. They're beautiful. The way that they just have so much detail up close is astounding. I wasn't really getting any detail from this version. I even felt like the Wiz Live had more interesting costumes. This just felt very plain to me. And I mean, I know that there's budget, I know there's limitations, but I was just very shocked because one of the big things about the Wiz was the costume. And it just seemed like there wasn't fun. And even so, I get if you're trying to take it in a new direction, but I think like, okay, new direction, like how is the costume steeped in a certain culture? I kind of felt that with the Tin Man. He had like a cool kind of like hip hop themed outfit. And when I say hip hop, I mean like hip hop, like those old like breakdancing like jackets and stuff. Like that's kind of what he had. So I felt that from the Tin Man, but I wasn't really feeling that from any of the other costumes. Some of the costumes were interesting, but I'm gonna move on to set, which is another big criticism that I have, because there were moments where I felt like, oh wow, this costume is cool, or like the tornado costumes, the poppy costumes. I thought those were interesting, right? The set, let's get into the set. So essentially what this version of the Wiz did is they had a big projection screen in the back, and sometimes they would bring in different set pieces, small set pieces, or like backdrops to kind of set the scene or like change background or location. And that could be cool. Personally, I don't love projections taking away from the whole show. I think that projections are really cool, and I think that they can be done in a really interesting way and like look amazing. But I felt like in this version of the Wiz particularly, it was really distracting. And most of the time, the what was going on the set had nothing to do with the story. I was really surprised because, I mean, Hannah Beecher is a big scene designer, and I know she works just in film. I don't know if she's ever done theater before, but like I was expecting more, and it was not giving. It was most of the time distracting. So there, like I said, there was a big production screen, and then sometimes things would come in. The things that were coming in, or like the backdrops, were very plain. I don't feel like they added a lot. I felt like sometimes it just felt very like almost tacky to me, a little like community theater, which isn't a bad thing, but if we're gonna go to Broadway, I don't expect that level of quality. I'm expecting something higher, and I was just kind of shocked. And the backdrops I can deal with, but it really was a projection screen for me. And I did hear an alleged rumor that a lot of the images that were projected on this screen were AI art. If that's true, I wouldn't be surprised, because the images looked very clip art to me. I don't even, I'm kind of baffled by how that was allowed, because it was so bad that in moments it took away from what was happening, like the choreography. It took away from the actors, because I'd look at the screen and I'd just be like, oh my, that looks so bad. Like, that just looks so bad. And I'm not trying to talk bad about anybody or say anything, but I'm just really shocked. Projection screens are quite expensive. I would have rather had just like nothing and just had the actors bring in stuff and had just the set backdrops than that. It just felt very underwhelming. And again, going with that projection screen, it felt like they spent so much money on this projection screen that like everything else was kind of just meh. Like nothing really lit up, nothing had special effects, nothing had cool smoke. Like it was just very blah. That honestly, that is my biggest criticism. Out of everything else, that's my biggest criticism, is the set. And I'm really hoping that they can change some things before it goes to Broadway, because it worries me. And I just think it is such a big distraction to have such a just underwhelming and clunky set compared to just how amazing everything else is in this version. It just shouldn't be. Again, I understand like sets take time. As someone who is right in the thick of that, it's hard, but I was just a little disappointed by how screen-based everything was. I mean, there are a lot of locations that they go back and forth to in the Wiz, right? There's a lot of locations, I understand that. But at the same time, it was really bad. And maybe I could do with the projection screen if the AI art was different, or it was more photographs, or it felt more real or in the world. Everything was just so computer generated. Like nothing made sense with this world. I have a couple pictures I think I can show, so I'll try to show them, but I'm hopeful that maybe that will change. I am going to take a step away from talking about the set and just mention that I also felt like the ensemble could have been a bit bigger. There are a lot of people, but at sometimes, I think especially because the set was so vast and open, because they had that projection screen in the back, it oftentimes felt empty when it needed to feel more full. Which either I hope that they add more ensemble, or they like take away from some of that empty space. Because there were a lot of moments where like people were selling it, the tornado was cool, and like those fun things were happening, but it just felt a little empty. So I feel like that's again like a set thing and not anybody else's kind of involvement. But I just wanted to mention that as well. Other than that though, I mean, those are things that can be fixed, so that's really positive. I think that hopefully in the Broadway version it will be different. I don't know, fingers crossed. But those are really the only things that I had criticisms about. Overall though, like, I did have a really good time despite a few of those criticisms. I really enjoyed the show. I mean, the ensemble just killed it. The orchestrations were beautiful. It was just so lovely to be in a big room that I felt like was catered to Black audiences, and that's something I really enjoyed. So if you have a chance, make sure that you catch The Wiz on Broadway, and by then things might have changed, so I'm really interested to see that. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a quick little review, and stay tuned for more. Bye.